All right, everyone. So right now we're going to give you a brief tutorial on how to complete this assignment. Week 5, design a plan based on assessment results. So what you need to do first is to download this template. Okay. And then once you've downloaded that, it's going to be a really good idea to have that template open and to have one of your previous assignments open right here. The one you worked on before that said Week 5 assignment, design an assessment and a quiz. So I'm going to open up both of those and have those side by side so that I can work off of both of those. Here's the one that, let's see. Okay, so here's the one that I'm working on right now, and this is the one that I worked on last time. So again, you're going to take information from this one, the quiz that you already designed, and say, okay, if I administered this quiz and got some results back from kiddos, what would I do with those results? That's the plan that you're going to design. So the learning goal that you had on this quiz that you designed before can go right here. And then the content standard being addressed, or standards, goes right there. So we're just going to move this information over to here. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're saying, okay, if I administered this quiz to my class, what would I do underneath? What would I do under each of these circumstances? What if, with the exception of a few of my students, most demonstrate that they're ready to move on? So consider the information presented through your course, as well as designing, thinking through designing your own plan. What do I do as a teacher? How would I adjust or adapt instruction if just a few of my students don't quite understand what's going on? And then what would my plan be if slightly more, if 20 to 30% of my students demonstrate they're not yet ready to move on to it? Remember, this is if you administered this quiz that you designed before. Okay? Then what happens if more than half, about 60% of your students demonstrate they're not ready to move on? What would be your plan for how to adjust and adapt your instruction? So what you're doing is showing that on a class-wide scale, this is what I would do if I was able to see the results and say, okay, I'm going to make some changes to instruction, all based on administering this assessment or quiz that you designed in a previous assignment. Now, let's take a look. What could we do in the case of helping individual students? That's what this next part is for, an instructional adjustments that you make for individual students. So you notice that before you created a quiz that was based on two different concepts, and you came up with like an ideal number for each one of those questions, and then you actually designed those questions in a form that you could administer that to your students. Well, at this point, you need to have a plan, and in this case, we're going to decide on either using a quantitative rubric or a qualitative rubric based on the results of your quiz for individual students. Up here, we were talking about what we would do on a class-wide scale, right? What would I do as a teacher with the whole class? But now I need to say, okay, if my student, an individual student, is at different levels, what would I do with that individual student in each of those cases? So right here, your learning goal comes right from here, the learning goal from your quiz. Okay, and you can choose either a quantitative rubric or a qualitative rubric. If your questions lend themselves to, you're just trying to see how many do they get correct, you might consider using this rubric right here that is the quantitative rubric. So see, for example, the top level could be is if they complete 4 out of 5 problems, or 87 to 100%. And then the next level could be 50 to 86%. You determine how many questions they get correct, or what percentage of those questions they get right in each of these levels. So your main learning goal would go right here, and then each part of it, each of the concepts that you address, one concept from here would go to this one right here, your first concept or construct, and then this one that you used right here will come to the top right here. Okay, and then for each of these concepts or constructs that you design, you're going to have something similar. You're going to have a level, top level of performance, like a 3, a 2, a 1, and then you're going to say, okay, what would I do in each of these cases? I might decide that the student is ready to move on. Well, these are just generic suggestions we provide you with. So you need to include, I would move on. The student is ready to move on to what? What's the next step? Let's say that the student only completes a lower percentage. What would you suggest? Does the student need reteaching, clarification, extra practice, examples, or something else? You need to narrow this down or modify this so it's very specific to your learning goal. Don't just leave. The student might require reteaching. You need to say they will need to be retaught what concepts. How would you clarify it? What sort of extra practice or examples? So don't leave just these generic suggestions, make them specific to your learning goal. And then if the student is really not being successful, they're at the lowest level. Let's say they don't get very many problems or any of them correct. What would you do at that point? So you're going to identify what are your different levels of performance and what would you do in each of those cases with the individual student. And you're going to do one for one part of your quiz that you designed. And then you're going to do another one for the other part of your quiz that you designed. Okay? So that's how that plays out. Now, you could use the quantitative rubric and then delete this other example, or you could get rid of this one and say, I don't want to know how many problems they got correct or what the percentage is. I really want to know to what degree are they understanding the process, or can they do certain steps? So quantitative, we're just looking at the numbers or percentage that they get right. Qualitative is we're looking at the quality of what's going on or the different elements. So we might say our level 3 is the student always uses all of the procedures for multiplying fractions. Level 2 might be student sometimes uses them, okay? And this one could be they don't use proper procedures. Or if there are multiple steps, let's say my construct is for mixed numbers. Let's say that, again, pulling this right from whatever was on my quiz here. Okay, let's say in this case, I say the student always uses procedures when multiplying mixed numbers, student sometimes. So you're looking at, you're describing the level of performance rather than quantifying. So in other words, you just need to pick either this one to use and delete the other one, or use this template and delete the other one, and fill in the elements from your quiz into everything that is red. Everything that's in red should be adjusted or adapted based on your learning goal and the concepts that you are assessing.